All right, let's dive into something a little different today. We're talking about cousin marriage.
Oh, yeah.
It might seem a bit taboo, maybe even a little strange to some,
Yeah.
but there's so much more to this than meets the eye. We're going to uncover some pretty surprising facts, go beyond those initial reactions, and really try to understand the diverse perspectives surrounding cousin marriage.
It's a fascinating topic, really. It touches on so many things like religious doctrines, power dynamics, even gets into cultural traditions and scientific debate.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild, right? Like you think about it. And our sources actually point to the Roman Catholic Church as having this massive impact on how Europe viewed cousin marriage.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to the Middle Ages, they actually banned it.
Yeah.
Primarily to, prevent inbreeding, avoid those perceived genetic risks.
Right. And while the church was all about those health concerns, the ban kind of played right into the hands of the European nobility. Yeah, for them, cousin marriage was like this strategic tool, right? To consolidate wealth, maintain their grip on power. It's almost like, I don't know, Game of Thrones in real life or something.
Oh, where?
Yeah.
Yeah, using family ties, strategic marriages to decide who rules the kingdoms. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
It is.
It's wild how something as personal as marriage could be so tied up in these power plays and political maneuvering.
Yeah.
And get this, our sources also talk about how early American colonies like Maryland and Virginia,
Oh, okay.
they had laws against cousin marriage too. But here's where it gets even more complex. These laws were often intertwined with racial biases, reflecting those social anxieties of the time.
Yeah, it really highlights how these legal and social norms, they don't just appear out of nowhere.
Right.
They're products of their time, shaped by the beliefs and anxieties of the societies that create them. It's really interesting.
So, okay, that's the historical context. But how do these historical trends play into the current legal landscape?
Right.
Is marrying your cousin allowed today, or is it just straight up a no-go?
Well, the answer's not so simple, especially in the United States. You've got this patchwork of laws across different states. 24 states, they have straight-up bans on first cousin marriage. 20 states allow it, and then you've got 6 states that are kind of like somewhere in between. They have these conditional allowances, based on things like age or infertility.
Right. So it's like every state has its own take on it.
Yeah.
Okay, what about over in Europe? Do we see similar differences in their laws?
Europe tends to be a bit more restrictive. Most countries have these clear bans on cousin marriage.
Okay, so we've laid out the legal groundwork. But how do people actually feel about these laws? I mean, is there widespread support for them, or is there pushback, especially from communities where cousin marriage is more common?
Oh, that's a really important point. And it's where things get really interesting, honestly. Public opinion is pretty divided on this, reflecting those cultural and personal values we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
In many places, especially where cousin marriage isn't traditionally practiced, you'll find support for these bans. Often they cite those health concerns, point to societal norms that view cousin marriage as kind of undesirable or even taboo.
Which makes sense. But I imagine there are strong feelings on the other side of the debate, too, especially from those communities where cousin marriage is really deeply rooted in their traditions.
Oh, absolutely. In cultures where cousin marriage is seen as a way to strengthen family bonds, to preserve cultural heritage, or to maintain specific social structures, there's often strong opposition to these legal bans. They see it as an infringement on their cultural practices and like a lack of respect for their traditions.
Right. So it's not just a legal debate. It's more like this clash between tradition and modernity.
Yeah.
Individual choices and those deep cultural values.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even within one country, individual viewpoints can differ a lot,
Yeah.
Personal experiences, family backgrounds, cultural influences, it all shapes how people perceive cousin marriage. It's complex.
So it's not as simple as drawing lines on a map and making these generalizations about different regions.
Right.
There's a lot more nuance going on.
A lot of gray area.
And our sources actually bring up some pretty strong criticisms of these bans on cousin marriage. Seems that the debate goes way beyond just those genetic arguments.
Yeah, you're right. The criticisms really dive into the core of legal rights and social implications. Some people argue these bans are based more in social stigma than actual scientific evidence.
Oh, interesting. So they're challenging the foundation of the law itself.
Exactly.
Saying it's more about societal perceptions than any solid scientific backing.
Yeah.
What other criticisms are they bringing up?
Another big point of contention is this idea of individual freedom. right?
Yeah.
You know, that fundamental right to choose your own partner, regardless of family ties.
Makes sense.
And then there's this concern that these bans fuel stigma and discrimination against certain couples and communities. They argue these laws create these unnecessary social divisions and anxieties, unfairly targeting groups who practice cousin marriage as part of their traditions.
So it's like they're highlighting the potential harm, the way these laws can create this climate of fear and exclusion for specific groups.
It's a reminder that every law, every social norm has a certain weight to it. It's important to think about the consequences, intended and unintended.
Right. So there's this multi-layered critique questioning the validity, the fairness, the social impact of these bans. It's a lot for governments to consider as they try to grapple with this complex issue.
And they are considering it. You know, our sources point to countries like England, Sweden, and Norway, where governments are really wrestling with these criticisms.
They're facing this real dilemma, how to balance individual rights, cultural sensitivities, and public health concerns. That's a tough act. Let's look at each country. What's going on in England?
Okay, so in England, there have been heated debates in Parliament about potentially banning cousin marriage. A former Conservative minister has been pushing for it, citing public health concerns, social cohesion. However, the Justice Minister is being a bit more cautious, asking for more time to review the situation, consider all the complexities involved.
So it's like a political back and forth with different sides vying for influence.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you look at Sweden, they're taking a different approach. They've been doing investigations, trying to understand the complexities of cousin marriage better.
Okay.
They seem to be searching for a middle ground, balancing public health concerns with individual freedom and cultural expression. They've even talked about maybe refusing to recognize cousin marriages performed abroad, which brings up even more legal and ethical questions.
Yeah, they're grappling with the internal and external implications, trying to find a solution that works on both a national and an international level.
Right. And then you have Norway, which went ahead and just implemented a full ban on cousin marriage this year in 2024. They're framing this as a public health measure, really emphasizing those potential genetic risks and the need to protect future generations.
So Norway's taking a firm stance, putting public health above other considerations.
Yeah, they have. But here's where things get even more interesting. Despite these legal changes and all the debate, cousin marriage is still deeply rooted in certain communities around the world.
Oh, that brings us right back to that clash between traditional and modern values.
Exactly.
It's fascinating. You've got governments enacting bans on one hand, and communities holding on to these traditions, seeing them as crucial to their identity and their social fabric.
Yeah. And this tension is playing out in real ways in communities across Europe. Take, for instance, the Basque communities in Spain and France.
Okay.
They have this long history of cousin marriage. They view it as, more than just a romantic union. It's a way to strengthen those family bonds, protect assets within the family, preserve their unique culture and language. It's about maintaining a way of life, connecting with their ancestors and their shared heritage.
That's a really powerful point.
Yeah.
And our sources suggest it's not just the Basque communities. There are similar beliefs in other parts of Europe, too.
Right. There are echoes of this in, rural areas of Greece and southern Italy. Cousin marriage there is often seen as a way to keep land ownership within the family.
Oh, interesting.
Reinforces those local ties, ensures the continuity of their agricultural traditions. It's a way to protect their livelihoods, maintain that sense of community, especially with all the economic and social changes happening around them.
So for these communities, it's not just about tradition, it's about survival.
Yeah.
Protecting what's theirs, both materially and culturally.
Absolutely. And it's not just about land or assets either. Sometimes it's about protecting their cultural and religious heritage. Our sources mention historical practices among Ashkenazi Jewish communities, for example, in Eastern Europe. Cousin marriage was often encouraged as a way to preserve their traditions, maintain their community, protect their religious identity in the face of all that external pressure and persecution they faced. It was a way to create safety and solidarity.
It's like weaving a safety net out of family ties, creating a sense of belonging and shared purpose.
That's a great way to put it. It's amazing how these practices have adapted and endured. Even with changing laws and social attitudes, it speaks to the resilience of culture and how much tradition shapes our lives and choices.
It shows you how much we still need to learn.
Yeah.
This deep dive has barely scratched the surface, and I'm already fascinated.
I know, right? And we're just getting started. Let's take a quick pause here, but when we come back, we're going to dig even deeper into the scientific debate surrounding cousin marriage and explore those genetic concerns that often drive those legal bans.